The Watchmaker, written and performed by me. This is a crazy story I can't believe I'm actually been a part of. I live in central London with my two beautiful dogs, Zoe and Sam. They're both pit bulls and I love them to pieces. I work as a primary school English teacher and love my job. Anyway, enough about me. There's a man near my house. The Watchmaker, I call him, due to him being the sole owner and worker of a huge watchmaker and repair shop, which is hidden away down a side street of a main street. I've walked past the shop a few times and heard from people around the local area that he's actually mute, and if I'm honest, it couldn't have happened to a more deserving guy. I hate him. Every time I walk past on my way to work, I want to smash that shop to pieces, or at least have the satisfaction of just the front mosaic window of all colours that was not inviting at all. There is a big park near the shop across the road, and you can actually see the shop front window and door from the park at the right angles. So, one day I was walking in that park, taking some still lifes of birds and other wildlife in the park. Photography is a little bit of a hobby of mine, as that's what my mother did for a living before she passed away a year ago. God, I miss her. When I took a little break and sat on a nearby bench to have a smoke, when I saw three boys outside the watchmaker's shop, pressing their hands on the dusty mosaic trying to get a glimpse inside, when they soon got bored and walked off chatting to one another. They were a strange looking group. I would later learn that the smallest boy, Joey, was 13 years old and lived not too far away with his mother and two little sisters. He was very short and skinny for his age, pale white skin, bright orange hair that stood to attention after being placed there by what I can only assume was a whole tub of hair gel. The second boy was 14 years old and called Peter. How I know all of this, I'll get to soon. He was a normal looking English boy with a football under one arm and a Chelsea football shirt on and shorts with athletic sneakers. The third boy was the weirdest for me. He was 16 years old and called Chris, but he was easily 6'3" and was very muscular. He wore dungarees and a black bucket hat that was army camoed. Very strange dress code Chris had. After they were out of sight, I left and went home. After a few days, I was getting ready to go to bed when Sam started kicking up a fuss. I could tell she needed to go to the bathroom. So I took her and Zoe out for a walk in that park. It was around 11:20 PM. It was fully dark outside, but lit up by the numerous streetlights that filled London. I started walking through the park, willing Sam to just do her business so he could go home and get out of the cold, when I heard a very loud and distinct smash of glass and an upset stomping of shoes. I moved to the gates that surrounded the park and saw where the source of the sound was emanating from. The watchmaker's shop was being broken into, and I could see three figures climbing through the now shattered mosaic, with pieces of green, red, blue, yellow glass shattered and crumbling under their feet with ease. I tied Sam and Zoe to a fence and told them to stay, which they obediently did with no sound, both of them lying down on the soft grass. I jogged over to the shop and sneakily peeked inside, as I could see them looking around using their phones as flashlights. I saw that it was the three boys I'd seen a few days prior. At one point, Peter turned to look in my direction sharply, and in return I sharply returned to cover, and then I jogged back to Sam and Zoe, who were getting a little anxious and started a small bark until they saw me and was quiet. I untied them and we rushed home. I didn't want to get involved in whatever that break-in was for, and I didn't like the watchmaker anyway, and I had Zoe and Sam who were getting scared with me, bless them. They love the business, but they really do shy away from danger. I later found out through Chris's father, whom I've been friends with for years, the whole story after he stopped beating Chris for setting a bad example on his little brother Peter and their new friend Joey, who was going out with their little sister Anna at the time, who was also 13 years old. He told me that they broke in to explore, which made more sense to me, to be honest, than them breaking in to steal anything. Nothing was of worth in that grotty old place. He said that they entered and looked around for around 20 minutes before deciding to go into a back room to explore, and then heard the cop sirens, so they ran back home. As he said this to me, I couldn't help but seeing the look on Peter's face, who came into the kitchen for a drink as we were talking. That what his father had just said was not true, After downing a few beers and watching Chelsea get another victory, at around 5 PM I left to go home with a reassuring hand on my shoulder of my friend John as he said, "I know you miss your mum, mate. You know I'm always here if you want to shoot the shit." I smiled and walked out the door as he walked back into the house. As I walked out, I saw Chris sitting on a football in the front garden next to Peter. I looked back at the house to make sure John was gone, and he was. So I took my chance to get the truth out of these two. I sat down next to him and said, "So you heard the police and ran out, right?" It was swiftly answered by Chris with a, "Yes, we left." I looked at them both and said, "We both know that that's not what happened, and you know it, so tell me the truth." They both looked surprised that I knew, and both said at the same time, "Please don't tell our dad." And I promised that I wouldn't, only if they told me exactly what happened. We went in and looked around for a bit, and then Joey found the door to the back room, so we went in and found lots of pictures and videos of young boys playing in the park across the road, including some of us playing football. I was speechless, and I wish I didn't ask really. This is all I needed to have this on my mind with me still grieving over the death of my mum. "If you promise to never go back there, I won't tell your dad." Which they both quickly agreed to. I said I will call the police on him when I got home, to which they both said no, because they broke in and Peter accidentally dropped his phone when they were running out, so he could easily be traced back to them. To which I said okay, but I will keep an eye on him in the coming days and try to catch him in the act, then I'll phone the police. This was just met with silence. I got up and walked away without saying goodbye and started my long walk home. Apparently the boys were so scared of getting caught, I got a phone call a few days later from John saying that the boys had gone over the line this time and had broken into the watchmaker shop again in an attempt to retrieve Peter's phone. But the watchmaker was still there, working on an old clock when he spotted them and was threatening them with a stick. So they decided to take the law into their own hands and beat him ruthlessly with this stick. Not that I cared too much about him. They said it was in self-defense, and after helping John with the boys, they all had child reprimands, which would go away when they turned 18, and they also had to do 50 hours of community service. The watchmaker, however, was in hospital, and found out when I went to confront him in the hospital a few days later that the boys had actually been visiting him. So I asked the nurse on duty why they kept coming, to which she replied, "Well, they're his grandsons, of course." To which I just sighed and shrugged my head because I knew that they were coming to taunt him, and decided to not cause any more trouble for John, so I left without meeting the watchmaker. Everything seemed to be normal for the next 2 weeks or so, but that soon ended when I was round John's playing poker, when Peter ran in with Joey and said, "Look what Joey's got, Dad." I took it from him and opened it as John looked over his chip stack and said, "Where did you get this, Joey?" Joey replied, "I found it on my bed when I come home from school today." I opened it and it just had a single piece of paper inside with the words, "Wrong guy," written inside. No return stamp and no address. I gave it to John, who then read it out loud to himself and said to me, "What the hell's going on?" With me shrugging and saying, "How the hell should I know?" We both turned to Joey and said, "Have you showed this to your mum yet?" He said no, she doesn't know. I scratched my head and sighed yet again with a, "Why can't we just have a nice night of poker without something happening?" With a nod of approval from John. He told them to go back into Peter's room and carry on doing whatever they were doing, most probably video games, while he kept the letter. When they left, he said, "These sick fucks. I'm gonna find who this is, and when I do, I'll... I stopped him and said that he shouldn't do anything and should just call the police and let them handle it, to which he ignored me with just silence. I took the letter and the envelope from him and threw it into the open fire under the chimney. With a few crackles, it was history. We slowly got back into the game, unintentionally, and forgot about the letter or what had happened. We finished the game with me emerging victorious. Then I left. I found out that the watchmaker died a few weeks after being admitted to hospital through his injuries. I couldn't care less, really. So, we come to the end of this little drama. Not much has happened in the last 3 weeks since then. I'm writing this from a dark place, to be honest with you. It's Joey's closet. His house was so easy to get into, and well, I waited for him to come home from school so we can get acquainted. It was hilarious seeing that old man's face when the boys found those pictures and videos I planted. My mum's old camera takes amazing pictures, you know. John squirming over who did it while I beat him at poker in his own house, drinking his own beer, was priceless. But now I've grown restless and want my trophy. I hope Joey likes surprises. Anyway, if you're hearing this in somebody else's voice, it's okay. But you might want to check your closet. I quickly followed him, not wanting to be alone with that door, or I know it sounds silly, but I was scared of it. We re-entered the room with his toolbox, to which I knew he would never get the door open with anything like that. While he rummaged through the old deep bag of feeble tools, I walked up to the door and noticed that there was a small square touchpad with the numbers 1 to 9 on it.